When Glenn and I were dating, we traveled to La Jolla, California. He for work and me for a free hotel room. And one of the things that we did when he was done with his conference was go and spend some time on the beach and the Pacific Ocean. And we packed a lunch. Well, we bought a lunch at a deli or something, and took a cab over. And then we thought it would be lovely. I wanted to do a hike. There's a California state park called Torrey Pines State Park. Some people know it. I guess there's a golf course in Torrey Pines as well. In the state park, named after this pine tree that only exists anymore in Torrey Pines. So I was excited to go see this tree because I like trees, and Glenn liked me, so he followed. And we're in Southern California, and we walked down the beach to get into this state park. We had with us each one little 16-ounce bottle of water for this hike. Not smart. We also had a backpack that did have plenty of sunblock in it, which we used lots of. Because the thing that we learned when we were on this hike with no map and not enough water, and years before we owned smartphones, was when you move away from the ocean and into the canyon park, it's basically a desert in there. I mean, California, it's kind of desert-like anyways, but it was a desert. We kind of call it our death march hike. We were walking along and drank our water, had no idea where we were going. We knew there was a visitor center somewhere. And eventually, we were slathering on sunblock and trying to walk along the, edge of the canyon in this much shade. I turned bright orange by the end, that night from sunburn, and I think that we were feeling much like the Israelites were feeling in the Hebrew scripture reading this morning. We were like, where is God in this death march of a desert wilderness walk that we were doing? And when we finally saw the sign that said visitor center 1 mile this way, and we got to the visitor center where there was water, it felt like a miracle. And I was thinking of this, remembering this as I'm imagining what the Israelites must have felt in their own wilderness experience, without a map, without knowing where they were going, trying to trust in Moses, who was somebody who they sort of knew who he was, but they didn't, and they kind of knew who God was, but they'd been in Egypt in slavery for a long time and had forgotten some of their stories and their trust in God. And in that story, in the Exodus story, the Israelite children have been wandering for years trying to get to the promised land. And eventually, they run out of the things that they need in this wilderness. They run out of, in this story today, water. And they do pretty much what Glenn and I were doing to each other, which was complaining and blaming each other, right? Why didn't you think about bringing more water? And they take that complaint to Moses because for them, Moses is God's spokesperson. Moses is the one who is speaking to them for God. So that's who they're complaining to and crying out. And then Moses takes that complaint up to God. And God provides a miracle. God tells Moses to use his staff and strike the rock, and out will come water. And I'm sure those Israelites felt about as wonderful as Glenn and I did when we finally got to that visitor center and could buy water. But one of the amazing things is the location where this miracle happens. The Exodus story says Horeb. Does anybody know where Horeb is? No, right? Somewhere in the Middle East. Good, yeah, Middle East. We also know of it. It goes by another name, which is Sinai. Oh, okay. Now we know now we're oriented. And what happened on Mount Sinai, if you remember your Charlton Heston or your Bible stories? Ten Commandments, right? Our good old Baptist raised Martha knows that, right? The Ten Commandments were given there. It's a location where God speaks, where God acts for God's people. Horeb is also the location where Moses, who had been raised by a Pharaoh princess, he knew he was Hebrew, but he didn't really know the Hebrew God. And at one point in his life, he flees into the wilderness. And it's in Horeb that Moses meets God in the burning bush. Remember that story maybe from your Sunday school days or your Charlton Heston film, right? And it's in Horeb that God acts, that God speaks, that God is present. And that's the same location where this miracle of water in the desert happens. And in this place where God is, we have this miracle. In this place where the children of Israel are crying out against God, complaining, yelling, arguing in their frustration and in their fear, right? Because certainly when their water ran out in the desert, they were afraid. They felt their mortality. They felt like death was happening to them. They felt like whatever they had experienced in the past was certainly better than the present that they are in now, right? They say, why did you take us out of Egypt, where they were enslaved? But that was better, knowing that they would be fed a meal, that they would have access to some water, was better than the fear and the chaos and the confronting of every horror that you can imagine. And so they cry out, is God among us or not? Did you bring us into the wilderness to kill us? Where is God in this fear and chaos and mess, in this wilderness and in this dry land that seems empty of everything? Is God here? And God is, because the place that they were was Horeb, the place where Moses encountered God for the first time. And this miracle happens. I still think of that visitor center as I remember it. It's little wooden building with the white peeling paint, and it had one little room with some, old pictures of Tory. I remember it because it was a miracle. But Moses doesn't name this location where the water sprung up as fountain of water or God's miracle. He names it Massa, which means quarrel. And he names it also Meribah, which means test, right? He names the place, I think because of his own frustration, right? And his own sense of where is God in this, right? And that's what he names the place. He doesn't name it for the miracle. He names it for the fear and the arguing and the yelling out angrily against God. Where is God? Is the Lord among us or not? Meribah. And I think that helps us remember that people of faith, people who, like the Israelites, who have seen miracles happen in their life, who have experienced them, still, that doesn't mean that your next days, your future days, are going to be filled with that same sense of miracle or God's purpose for you in your life. You are still going to encounter hardship and chaos and fear and wondering where God is when everything around you is falling apart in your life. Is God here or not? I think that question, that very human question, was one that the woman in John's gospel also wrestled with. She doesn't say those same words, but she has the longest discussion with Jesus in the entire Bible. A woman has the longest theological conversation with Jesus in the Bible. And in this woman, we get a lot of details about her in this story, right? We learn that she's been married, right? And how many times, if you remember, how many times has she been married? 5, right? And the person that she's living with, is that her husband? No. So that means 6 men, right? Sounds like a lot, especially in those days. And so commentators in the past, people who've studied the story in the past, they get hung up on that number, that 5 husbands. That's a lot of husbands. She must be promiscuous, right? But the truth is so much sadder than that. Okay? So much sadder than that. Anybody who's been through a long-term committed relationship and that relationship has ended for whatever reason knows the heartbreak of that, right? If you've been through divorce, if you've been through loss, that there's so much pain in that, right? And this woman had to experience that not once, not twice, not 4 times, 5 times. Can you imagine the depth of that pain that she must have experienced? And in that culture, there was something called levirate marriage, where if you were widowed and you didn't have children to be your future, to take you in when you're old, like we're hoping Rachel takes us in when we're old, right? We, the dead husband's brother was to take you into his home, to take care of you, okay? And to have children by you for your dead husband, okay? As a way of providing for you. But was that brother her husband? Not really. Okay? Chances are he had his own wife. Can you imagine moving in as the woman, the widow, into that situation? Jen? No, right? No. Right? There's nothing good in that situation. There's no joy. There's no feeling of future or prosperity, or there's mere survival. Right? And this woman has gone through this time and time and time again. Is it no wonder she's now with somebody else who's not her husband, looking for that kind of connection? Right? There's so much, and you have to. One of the amazing things that I think in her story is that when you experience that kind of pain in your life, you have a few responses, and one is God is not here. There is no God. Is the Lord among us or not? No, he is not here. What kind of God would let this happen to me over and over and over again? But that's not her response. She is wrestling with this. Probably inside her soul, she is wondering where God is, but she's still trusting in God. And I know this because of the conversation she has with Jesus. Right? She doesn't say, "You're God? Sure. God doesn't exist. God's dead." She says, "Where do we worship God? I worship him here. You guys say in Jerusalem." And she has this conversation. She is wrestling. Where is God? She wants to know. Because she hasn't given up on God in her life, even though her life is not great. And this is the heart of faith, isn't it? Because it's a lot easier to believe in God when your bellies are full and you're not thirsty, right? Or your marriage is strong, or your job is secure, right? Or your mortgage is being paid for. And it's a lot harder to hold on to that when the marriage falls apart, or the job says, if you want to keep the job, you have to move 2,000 miles away. Where is God in all of that? Is God among us or not? It's a question I've actually been hearing a lot from friends, sometimes from parishioners. They don't quite say it like that because they don't want to admit to me that they're like, maybe, where is God in the mess of this world? Right? My best friend, Pat, my best friend from when we were 9, is a devout atheist. He lives in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. And this February, he was sharing his pain, his fear about what he was seeing happen in his city. His anger over the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And he said, "This is why I don't believe in God. No God would allow this to happen." Right? And he's right. Right? He's like, this is why I can't believe in God. Where is God in this mess? And the answer is right here. That God is still here, right? The Israelites are in the wilderness. They're in the region of Horeb where God has spoken, and God is right there. Right? God hears their cries, he hears their anger, and he responds through Moses. Okay? And the Samaritan woman, she's wrestling and she's holding on, I think, to her faith by her fingernails. And Jesus travels to be with her. And today, we're the vehicles of grace that respond in the world when things are falling apart. Right? We're the ones to reach out to each other when the relationship fails or the cancer diagnosis is given. We do that for each other. We are God's face. We are Christ's body in this world. The answer to, is God among us, is you.